My husband's listening to the final minute of the Steelers Ravens game.
Who's winning?
Steelers, but it's by 4 points.
A weird number for football.
I know. It's it's like I don't know, weird number, 15-19 or something. I don't know. It's
Of course.
yeah.
So if there's random screaming in the background, we know that it's coming from your house. That's good.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And it will not be good to hear. So, oh,
I'm assuming he's Steelers fan.
rabid. He's born and raised in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
That'll do it. It's a great city.
Yeah, I love it. It may be over.
That's weird. If it's over at 7, it must have started early.
3:30.
Sorry.
It's
Yeah.
the game's been moved 3 times, and so the only time they could fit it in was 3:30. Because I think they're rebroadcasting the Thanksgiving Day oh no, it's the lighting of Rockefeller Center, the lighting of their
Oh.
so that's why they had to have the game at 3:30 in the afternoon, because they didn't want to bump the tree lighting.
There's a joke there, but I won't make it. I'm
Okay.
not sure what it is, but I'm sure it would come off wrong. So
Or the making of a Saturday Night Live skit. You know?
yes,
There you
exactly.
go.
Yes.
Well, as a New Yorker born and raised, I can tell you.
Aaron, you just now figuring out the Zoom background thing? What are you doing, man?
I got my computer re-imaged and I'm realizing that my backgrounds are all flipped. You see that?
Oh, yeah, they're reversed.
And by the way, I should share that somebody did just let me know that we're live and they're hearing our chatter, which is fine. We're having great chatter, and I hope that everyone's enjoying our very weak jokes, such as they are. So yeah.
Oh, you mean all the attendees are hearing us?
Yeah. So, Mr. Bevan, thank you for the email alerting us to that. So, yeah.
Oh, it got pretty quiet.
Yeah, I know.
Everybody knows about my background and my computer now.
Oh, it looks like we have quite a few attendees. And
So
so,
you
yeah, subtract how
figured
many?
out the 2 panels. Yeah.
And then each of the chairs are here and all the consultants are here. So kind of whenever you're comfortable with the attendees getting in here, feel free to begin whenever.
Well, we're
Wait.
missing Leon.
Leon,
So,
oh, missed one.
is he on the list there?
Should be.
Don't see him yet.
Okay. Well, he's later in the presentation, so maybe he's running a little late.
You just let me know when you want me to get started and I'll do that.
I'll text him.
And Nick Lashutka, our co-chair, will be joining us a little later. He had basketball, I think, with one of his sons. Both of them? Okay.
I think. Yeah.
So would you like me to get started? Or do you want to wait another minute or two?
Margie, I'd go ahead.
Okay.
I think, yeah.
Great. Well, good evening to everyone. It looks like we have perhaps 55 or more individuals from the community joining us this evening, and we're delighted about that. We may have some continuing to come on to the meeting. Welcome to all of you. We're delighted that you're here. I'm Margie Pizzuti. I'm the co-chair of the Community Center Feasibility Task Force, along with my fellow co-chair, Nick Lashutka, who will be joining us in a little bit. Really, this tonight's meeting comes at the end of an extensive and robust study process that began, believe it or not, in August of 2019. And I know that both Nick and I will agree that it's been a great honor for both of us to lead this effort and for the opportunity to work with a terrific group of 14 of our fellow task force members. Many of whom are with us this evening and guided by our consultant team and our very, very helpful and supported city staff. So we were charged, as many of you may know, by City Council to explore the community's needs and desires for a community center, and then to determine if such a facility would be feasible for Upper Arlington. As you will hear tonight, our work was conducted in 2 phases. Many of you who have been following us know that, with extensive community engagement activities throughout the process to make sure that residents heard about and about what we're doing, and also to have input in that. So this evening, you're going to hear about the work that was conducted in 2 phases. With it, again, as I told you, phase 1 really did affirm the need for a community center. And we got significant feedback. And we also heard from residents what they felt should be included in a community center. Phase 2, which is going to be the focus of our conversation and presentations this evening, is on our facility subcommittee, who has worked to identify potential sites for a community center and to develop facility concepts. While our finance subcommittee, who you'll also be hearing from, has studied the costs associated with building and operating a community center, and has explored funding options, and has developed several business plan scenarios. So we've got a lot to share with you this evening. As I said, tonight's presentation will focus in on phase 2. So you'll be hearing both about facilities and finance, as well as the findings from our second of 2 statistically valid surveys that were conducted as part of this process. So we're excited also to share with you some of the highlights from that. So before I hand things over to Nan Weir, who's one of our consultants with Williams Architects, I'd like to thank everyone in the community who has been involved, both those who are on the call now, as well as many others, and taking us through this process, and especially to the task force members who have been energetic and quite frankly, exceeding expectations, I think, on City Council's charge to us. So we've learned a lot, and we are glad to share information with you this evening. And we're really confident that the final set of recommendations and findings we present to City Council on December 16th will truly be a reflection of what we've heard from the community, with guidance from our task force consultants and members of the city staff. So, Nan, I'm going to turn this over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Margie. Jeff, do you want to put the presentation up?
Yeah, give me just a moment here. We'll get that, unless Rick has it ready to go.
Well, I have it if you want me to do it.
Yeah, go right ahead.
All right. So Margie really spoke to what we're going to be covering tonight. So we're really going to be looking at where we've been and what we've learned and where we are now, and sort of the implications of that in terms of how we move forward and how we pay for this, assuming that this continues to move forward as it appears that it will. And so we're happy to be sharing that with you tonight. As Margie mentioned, I'm Nan Weir with Williams Architects, and we are the lead firm on the consultant team, serving as the architects and programming and planners. We are also working with Pros Consulting to do the business plan and Proforma, and OHM to do the land planning and the community engagement piece. And of course, the task force, which is 16 citizens, as Margie mentioned, 14 members of the different subcommittees, plus Nick and Margie as co-chairs. They've been a great group to work with, and they've done a lot of really hard work. And again, the questions she mentioned, that have been at the heart of what this this charge is, do we want a community center here in Upper Arlington? And if yes, what does it look like, and what will it include, and how will it be paid for? So as Margie mentioned, the task force started a year ago, August, and the consultants actually started a year ago, November, and we completed phase 1 in June of this year. And since then, well, really since August, have been working on phase 2. And we're really at the point to share a lot of our findings, to get some final feedback, and to next week work with the task force to make their final recommendations that they'll be presenting to council on December 16th. So here's where we're going with that. So there will be a presentation with some recommendations to council on the 16th, and then also a presentation of the report on the 11th, and really completion of that report by the end of January. So with that, I will hand that over to Supan.
Everyone, my name is Supan Bo. If you don't already know, I'm the chair of the Community Engagement Subcommittee. Community engagement has really been an important piece of the entire study. We are a community that likes to get involved and give our feedback, and that is a wonderful thing. All the details we've gathered from the community during phase 1 through the various community engagement efforts have really laid the foundation for our work in the phase 2. And what we've learned during phase 2 actually continues to sort of fortify what we heard from the community in phase 1. So before I turn it over to Aaron to give over more specific details, I did also want to say thank you to the entire community for staying engaged and active with the task force. We really appreciate it. And your engagement has been what has been the key to making this a successful and informed process. So Aaron, can you take it from here and just go through what we learned in phase 1?
Yeah, thanks, Supan. Good to see everybody back on. And for those of you who are just joining us, I'm glad to be able to share this information with you. My name is Aaron Domney. I'm a principal with OHM, and I've been leading this process with Nan, specifically on the engagement side. So I'm going to go over both some phase 1 conclusions and phase 2. And I'll go through phase 1 quickly. So if you've been part of the journey, you might have seen some of this information before, but we always feel it's good to go back and tell a little bit of the story to kind of catch us up to where we are now. In phase 1, a lot of engagement happened. We also did program development. We looked at some potential locations, and we evaluated and scored some locations, and that kind of started to move us into phase 2 to select some preferred locations. So all these things were happening as part of the engagement process as we move forward. Let's go to the next slide. Phase 1 engagement was pretty robust. We had a number of interviews that we conducted with staff and city leadership, as well as 41 different stakeholders. And we also did 12 community pop-ups, many different mini community meetings kind of out in the community at different places when we were all gathering together. Talked to 460 residents through that engagement effort. We had a community meeting back in November of 19, about a year ago. And then there was also a needs assessment and survey done. So both an online survey was done, as well as a statistically valid survey that was done as part of phase 1. So that touched a lot of different residents through that first round of engagement. Let's go next slide, Dan. So I want to share this with you. This was the results in phase 1, and I want you to take note of this because we did do another statistically valid survey in phase 2. So in phase one, the question was, is there support for a community center if funded without a tax increase? About 80% were supportive, 13% unsupportive, and about 7% were neutral. So this was a year ago. Next slide. And then we asked the same question, if there was a tax increase, what's your level of support? So that dropped down to 54% and 33% respectively. So you can see kind of the shift there a year ago when that was conducted. So the big part for us is part of phase one, and again, I'm keeping very simple here because we've presented this a number of times. I just wanted to kind of go back. That there's two questions. One, is there support for a community center? Through all the engagement that we did in phase one, we concluded that yes, there is support from the community center for a community center in Upper Arlington. The second thing we determined and evaluated and created in phase one was a vision and a program. And again, in the interest of time, and because we've presented this a number of times, I'm not going to go through that. But we did create a program as part of phase one, and that essentially was what goes into the building, what are the activities, how are the spaces used, and Nan will present that as part of the program or the building design and preliminary design as she goes into that later on in the program. So you'll start to see how those things came to life. So let's move on to phase two. This is a little bit more, this is some more recent information. Again, some of this was presented at our last community meeting a number of weeks ago, but let's dig into this a little bit together too. So phase one really, once we understood there was support, the question was, well, where does it go? And that was a big part of the research that was done in phase two. So let's keep going, Nan, please.
Well, and I guess we were going to have Greg speak about this process a little bit too.
Thanks for that. Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could jump in real quick. I'm the chair of the facilities subcommittee, and we worked with OHM and Williams relative to the phase two process. And it really has been three parts to that, which we are going to have Aaron kind of get into in a little more detail. But the first part was looking at a site evaluation. Where do we site this community center? And OHM went through this process using a bunch of criteria that we developed as a result of the initial surveys that we did early on in the phase one process. Out of that, 2 sites have been selected, the MSC site in Kingsdale. Aaron will get into that. The second thing we had them do was, with those 2 sites, look at a site plan or develop a site plan for those sites, and also develop building concepts. And so they've been spending the last couple months fine tuning those and looking at those. And then lastly, and this is obviously very important, spending a lot of time to evaluate the cost of those concepts on the both sites. So I guess that's my little interlude. I will let Aaron jump back in and kind of take us through the detail. But our subcommittee's been working hard with both OHM and Williams to kind of put this all together. So go ahead, Aaron. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. I'm glad you jumped in there. And Steve wanted to remind me that the community meeting was a year ago, but the first round of surveying was 8 to 9 months ago. So I appreciate that note, Steve, just for accuracy. So Greg did a great job talking about some of the things that we've done in phase two. And Anna will present some of the things related to the site and the operational and the financial piece. I'm going to talk specifically about looking at the sites. So let's jump into that, Nan. So we developed a lot of site criteria to evaluate sites by. And this criteria was built out of what we learned from phase one through all the engagement, pop-ups, the community events, stakeholder interviews, in terms of what was important to the community in terms of the site. So the evaluation criteria you see here is on the left, was built out of that. And it was also infused with some of the information and criteria that the consultant team put together, as well as the city. So things like site control, accessibility, you see them all listed there on the left. These are all the sites that were considered, and you see them on the map there. Again, these were presented at our last community meetings. If you were there, you remember this slide. And from these, we looked at all these sites. Let's go to the next slide. And we applied the criteria to the sites. We're not expecting you to see all this information in the numbers, but we want you to know that a matrix was developed. We scored them, we evaluated them in detail. And from that, coming out of that process, were 2 sites that rose to the top. And those sites were the Kingsdale site and the MSC site. So you can see how they scored there, 43 and 38.5 respectively. Both scoring very high and you know, small margin of error or difference between the two. Both centrally located, which was a very important piece of selection criteria that we heard from the community in phase 1. So from there, we dug a little bit deeper. We sharpened the pencil. We got more criteria on the table and evaluated these sites a little bit deeper. So we started to look at this next layer of criteria, which you see here, things like environmental issues, a development cost, partnership opportunities, all that, you know, there's a whole nother layer of evaluation criteria that was then applied to both of these sites. And so from this evaluation, Kingsdale outscored the MSC site by a narrow margin. And you'll see in the next slide, it was about, I think, 52 to 50, both scoring pretty well. And so this gave us direction and it kind of informed us that, you know, there is, based on scoring, a slight preference for Kingsdale based on the evaluation criteria. Now you'll see as we keep going here, more work was done to really understand the preference for these sites. So again, this was based on the scoring and the metrics that were developed by our team together with the community input, but we wanted to take it a little bit further and better understand the community preference for these 2 sites.
So we looked at both of these sites and developed these blocking and stacking diagrams. So MSC stands for Municipal Services Center. And this first concept, we looked at what happens if we, and we talked about keeping sort of the functions of city administration and police, and then adding a community center to the site. And so this lower portion shows the existing municipal building with an addition. And then this looks at the option of tearing down the existing building and rebuilding a new building with all 3 of those functions. And we looked at just these blocking and stacking diagrams. And we did that for this site, as well as for the Kingsdale site, which, as you know, is really the Macy's site as it's shown here. And that just the timing of this as it happened, you know, the site is set empty for so long that Kroger's did decide to move on this and redevelop it. And the timing was such that there was a multi-use development for the site, and the city was able to talk to the developers about the possibility of including the community center at this location, which is shown here on the right as part of this mixed use development. We looked at several different blocking and stacking diagrams for Kingsdale, and we really compared the 2 sites, again, just to vet the site selection and the concepts. And then we also developed costs. And it's important to understand here that this is really looking at the MSC site, again, for the 3 program functions of the community center, the city administration, and police, and comparing that to the Kingsdale Center site community center, because this is the cost of what it would take to complete the community center at each location. So you can see there's a difference in square footage between the MSC site and the Kingsdale site. The community center program is essentially the same at both locations. So when you look at the hard cost is the actual construction cost, and we take those numbers and then we add what are called soft costs to that. And so the soft costs include professional fees for architects and engineers and attorneys and other specialty consultants, furnishings and equipment, and an owner contingency, which is just a way of budgeting for some unexpected conditions that might develop over the course of the project. So the project budget also includes, we've been trying to be fairly conservative with this, and the project budget also includes 10% design contingency. And what that is this building hasn't really been designed other than at a conceptual level. And that's typical in the industry to carry a 10% design contingency through the first actual schematic design and design development phases. And as the project gets more detailed, then that can go away as some of these unknowns become knowns. A 3% construction contingency, which is really, this is built on a CM at risk model. So this is for their unknowns during the construction phase. And I already mentioned the owner contingency, which is actually in the soft cost line item. And then we also initially, we had presented these numbers with just a footnote about the escalation, but we all thought it was important to really show what the escalation might be. And this is just based kind of on historical data and anticipated future inflation over the next year or so. In this case, 30 months until we would anticipate that to be about the midpoint of construction. So to, again, just build in some cushion into the project for those unknowns and unpredictable items. So what we did is Williams developed an initial cost estimate based on a database that we have that's based on built projects around the country, and it was on a square foot basis. And then we also vetted it sort of at the next level of detail, more on a systems basis. So we were looking at the foundation costs and the structure costs and the cost of the skin and the cost of the HVAC, and put together some preliminary numbers. And then because again, that came from our national database, we wanted to verify that with some local contractors who were familiar with this market and could advise us on that accordingly. So we reached out to Messer Construction and Gilbane Construction, and they both did a high altitude pass at the budget and were actually able to affirm that these numbers appear to be appropriate for this market and this timing for this project. And then following that process, we also asked Gilbane to do a more detailed cost estimate. So they took their estimate to the next level to again develop a little more detail in the same fashion that we did, looking at the different components of the project. And again, these numbers were validated, and we believe we're on track for a pretty conservative estimate of the project costs moving forward. So Aaron, back to you.
Thanks, Dan. Like a true, I feel like we're a good radio host here. So I did give some kind of prelude to the fact that we would revisit the community insights. And as a reminder, when I gave that prelude, I was talking specifically when we did the first round of community surveying and statistically valid surveying. And so we did that again together with more stakeholder meetings. We did 5 more stakeholder meetings, same stakeholder groups we met with the first time. We had community meeting 3, which just happened recently. Talked about the statistically valid survey, an online survey. We've had a number of task force meetings, all during phase 2. So a pretty robust second round of engagement that has happened as part of this effort. So at our last meeting, we did unveil some of the concepts. We did some live polling, and essentially we're not expecting you to see all the details there. It's really just eyewash. But we did get some good affirmation from the group that the 2 sites that were identified were the best sites, and there was strong preference for that. And after seeing both the site locations, and you can see there in the red, the middle diagram, the red bar was Kingsdale was the preference at that meeting. And so that was giving us good direction that we had done some good work. We did select the best sites, at least based on the opinions of folks at the meeting. And we got some good feedback on some of the preliminary concepts as well, and some good feedback on both MSC and Kingsdale related to things like parking and access and buffering, which we've also considered as part of the design as it moves forward. So here are some of the survey highlights, round 2. So this is the second round of a statistically valid surveying that was conducted as part of the process. So you can see some of the details there about how it was conducted, 300 randomly selected registered voters. You can see the margin of error there. There was also an online survey that was done that fielded about 1,600 responses. Upper Arlington continues to be the blue ribbon winner for people that participate in these processes. So good for all of you who are responsive. And I would say that both of the online survey as well as the statistically valid survey were pretty close to being in alignment. I'll share some of those results with you here on the next slide. So this was the statistically valid survey. The question on the left, this is right out of the survey. Maybe you were one of the folks who responded. Do you support or oppose locating the proposed new community center at the site of the vacant Macy's building at Kingsdale Mall, which would cost approximately $50 million? So really giving a lot more information there as part of the question. And it was 74.8% support, 16.4% oppose, and 8.8% unsure. We asked a similar question, as you can see on the right there, that asked a level of support for the new community center at the site of the city administration building on Tremont Road, which will require a new consolidated building, so on. And then we also listed the cost. So only 23% of the community supported that site, 70% were opposed. So that's pretty clear direction for the task force as it relates to the two sites from the community, which one has a greater preference. Next slide, Nan. Some other highlights and takeaways from the survey. Number one was the awareness of the study process, very high at 70%. 70% of the community knew this was happening. Strong support for the city constructing the community center at 75%. Strong support for including senior-centered programming and facilities at almost 70% there as well. So making sure that's part of the program moving forward. Current senior center is underserving residents. 3% reported frequent use of the senior center, while 25 respondents were age 60 and plus. And then looking down a little bit further here, the former Macy's site at Kingsdale is the preferred location. So that was kind of the key takeaway. When cost was included in the question, there was 74.8%. When cost was not included in the question, it was 82.1%. And then support for including office space to offset operating and maintenance costs was 68%. Meaning, is there some type of public-private partnership or integration of office space to offset the cost? Support for that as well. So going a little bit further, voters, the question is, if a community center issue was placed on the ballot, would voters support the city issuing up to $55 million in bonds without raising any new taxes to construct a community center? Almost 75% there. And then voter support of a 30-year $500,000 property tax increase is less supported, but still positive at 63.7%. Online survey voters support it was notably lower at 54% there. So you can see the difference in the delta between the statistically valid survey and the online survey related to the tax increase. So Nan, back to you in the true spirit of our radio programming here.
There you go. Thank you, Aaron. So as we have been demonstrating, Kingsdale is the preferred location, and that's both in terms of its central location, the design, its cost, and the implementation as we move forward. And part of that is there is a real, you can see some of the reasons here, but the developer partnership and the revenue opportunities really do start to set this site aside, and that there are really quite a few amenities that come with the developer partnership, such as the additional parking and some of the site development costs that really don't end up being a true cost of the community center because they are built into the cost of the adjacent development. And that is a real benefit of this site. And then, as Aaron mentioned, the possibility of some office leases or some other partners that might be a financial partner in this, or through capital, or certainly through lease or income to offset some of the operating costs. So those are really some significant advantages to this site over the MSC site. So where are we now? As we've been mentioning, we've refined different location concepts. We've looked at some construction cost analysis. We've identified the preferred location and the more detailed costs. We're still in the process of, or the city's still in the process of some conversations with some potential partners, which will continue to unfold over the coming months. The Finance Committee and PROS have really been looking at developing the membership costs and the funding strategy. And then we've just recently completed this statistically valid survey. So things are really starting to come together. And again, here's the existing Kingsdale site with the Macy's the Macy's store shown there. Again, the community center site at the southwest corner of the Macy's site with the apartments and some parking and senior housing and a ground floor restaurant and potentially some offices on the upper levels of the community center. And the community center itself, as we've mentioned, the core program activities were identified in phase 1 through a lot of community surveying and input. And I'll just walk through that really quickly here because many of you have seen these plans. So this is the ground level of the community center. And on this level, there's a pretty significant lobby that can be a community gathering space, a party room, and the aquatics feature. So this is a multi-use pool that combines slides and lap pools, zero entry portion of the pool with children's amenities in terms of activities. And also there's 60 parking spaces on the ground level. And so you can access the building from either the parking garage side or the street side. There's also a lobby that would serve the offices with an interior connector between the community center lobby and the office lobby. So folks coming down from the office to use the community center don't have to go outside. Level 2, you have this overlook into the pool as well as group exercise and fitness and some administrative office space. Level 3 are the gymnasiums, the traditional gymnasiums, the MAC gym, and the child watch area directly off the lobby, plus some of these adventure play and analytics areas that really start to add some additional amenities to the fitness opportunities. The 4th level is a track that runs around the inside of the gymnasium and also has a centralized area for stretching. Level 5, so on this level is the senior center, which consists of a lounge, some other program areas and resource areas, a billiards area. There are also some multi-use rooms and art room along this side here. This is a large multi-use facility. This is showing table and chair seating for 250 people. There's a demonstration kitchen and there's a large outdoor patio. And then also in this area, there's some administrative office space, as well as some leasable office space that could go to a tenant or a potential partner in the community center. And then the 6th and 7th levels are identical, just showing an office floor plate of approximately 25,000 square feet on each of the 2 floors. So that's kind of the program area. So the key components of the aquatics and the gymnasium and the exercise. And we'll touch a little bit more on some of these amenities. You can see this massing model. The building really hasn't been designed, but this just suggests what the massing might be with the patio right here and then the floor plate stepping back a little bit along that edge. So in terms of the amenities, this is an image of what the lobby could look like. And there was an intent here to bring in some of the stone and wood materials from the current MSC to really start creating this language of sort of the public buildings in the city. And also the blue color here is just a suggestion to that blue strip that's in the limestone in so many of the buildings in this community. But just really trying to bring in some of the materials and create some of the warmth that we have in our current MSC public building, and then really create this as a gathering space for the community. And you can see that we have like a coffee kiosk. This would be the welcome desk where you would check in. You can see a climbing wall in the distance, and this is looking towards Tremont Road. So this side is the driveway into the site, and the assisted living facility would be across in the green space. And then you can see a monumental stair going up to the second floor, which really goes up to all the way up to the 5th floor, ultimately. This is an image of what the pool could look like with, again, in the foreground, the 0 entry access to the pool, as well as some amenities for younger children. You see some lap lanes in the background, and in the far back, some slides, and then some open water. So this is that combination pool that just provides a lot of different things. And because there's a new natatorium as part of the high school project, that is not part of this swimming pool. This is on, excuse me, this is the gymnasium and the track. So you're on the level 4 overlooking the gymnasium with the track running around the perimeter. And in the back, you can see in the distance the adventure play area. This is level 5, and this is a senior lounge. And we're envisioning that there would be coffee service from the kitchen that serves the multi-purpose room and the demonstration kitchen. There'd be a resource center here where you could do some consulting with people on different program and social needs, and in the background, some billiards. And then some of the other rooms would be further down the floor on the multi-purpose room, and some of the art rooms would also be on this level. This is an image of the multi-purpose room that seats 250 people and is up high enough to have a really great view. So this is actually looking sort of southwest. So this is the south view that would look over Arlington, and this is to the west. And you can see that there's a fireplace, and we're showing a wall that would open out to the patio. You could also access that from the corridor. And then this is just a suggestion of what the patio might look like. It probably would be available as both a sitting place and also the possibility of being able to offer fitness classes on this patio for different uses. So we really see this as a great community asset and amenity for wedding receptions and other large business or other meetings. So some real opportunities here. So we'll move into this next section of how do we pay for that? And I'll hand it off to Matt.
Thanks, Nan. I'm Matt Rule, the chair of the Finance Subcommittee. And, after the facilities team worked through some of these beautiful designs, really the question comes down to, can we afford to move forward with this type of community center? So the Finance Subcommittee has been working for the last several months with Leon and our consulting team at Pros Consulting, really evaluating 2 specific aspects. And if you want to go to the next slide here, Nan, what the Finance Subcommittee really felt strongly about from day one, based upon not only informal conversations and informal feedback from the community, but also from the statistically valid surveys that Aaron referenced earlier in the presentation, is that we wanted to move forward with a goal of not to increase the residents' property tax burden. As you saw from some of those other survey results, 75 to 80% favorability for the community center if it was possible to move forward without an increase in the property tax burden. So we really set that as a benchmark and walked forward from there. And we focused our analysis with Pros and their guidance and their wide range of other examples from adjacent communities, focused really on the operating expenditures. We wanted to make sure that we were evaluating an operating model that was self-sustainable. And so we looked at what market rate membership levels, and we're going to touch on those a little bit here. Leon's going to share some of his work in that area, and also back at historical city funding for operational recreation services and said, you know, if we were to look at a community center based upon market rate membership levels and applied historical city recreational service funding levels, would we have a sustainable community center that's not going to require funding that draws away from other services provided by the city currently? And the Finance Committee, through a lot of work and some stress testing that we're going to share with you here tonight, I think is really comfortable that at this point, we do believe that a community center is operationally feasible over the long term. And we also looked at the capital costs. So really going back to how do we construct a community center without going back to residents for an increase in property taxes. We looked at a combination of revenue streams. We looked at some TIF revenues, both existing TIF revenues and anticipated TIF revenues from a Kingsdale mixed use development. We looked at some of the hotel bed tax revenue and existing city reserves above and beyond what City Council has recommended the city maintain. And the combination of those funding streams really has shown that funding the capital costs of a community center from those funding streams without going back to residents for a property tax increase is feasible. I think Leon's going to walk us through and give us a little more definition around what market rate membership levels may look like, and also dive in a little bit on how we stress tested this, you know, not just living off of Proforma, but looking at a few different scenarios and really scrutinizing them to make sure that the long-term viability of this community center works. So Leon, I'm going to let you walk through kind of some assumptions around the facility operations that your team worked through, as well as share with the team those market rate membership levels and the stress testing analysis that we've worked through the last several months.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Well, in developing the Proforma, part of our process is to create a set of assumptions. And an example of what that looks like starts with facility operations and the number of hours that the facility we open from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. and 7 days a week. There typically are 10 core spaces that are involved in this community center. Nan had outlined those as an example: athletics, aquatics, fitness, seniors, community gathering spaces, walking track. Those core spaces make up the center. When we look at it, we also look at the revenues that are applied to the community center with daily admissions, so people can access it, or a drop-in fee that's associated with different types of programs that people specifically want. People can sign up for a punch pass, which is usually 10 passes, or they can incorporate and access a membership. And memberships really fall into a single or couple, a family, a senior. And so the memberships vary by the type of user, the time of day, and ability to pay. And then recreation program fees are associated with some programs that don't require a daily or a punch pass or a member to belong to. Also looking at rentals, there'll be spaces that people can rent for practice, for their games, for activities in the community, gathering spaces in the community rooms, and vending. So these revenues are really costed out over a daily, a weekly, a monthly, and a yearly process, so that when you look at all of the types of activity that's associated with each one of these spaces, that adds up to an overall revenue associated with the building. And then expenses are estimated based on what we learned from the staff, their input, and comparable industry rates across the area in recreation centers that are in the immediate Columbus, Upper Arlington area. And the intent here was to really kind of have a goal of 80% or better to cover the operating costs associated with that. Because currently right now, the senior center the existing senior center has a level of tax base that we wanted to carry over into this building as a way of demonstrating to all the senior groups that the dollars that the city is investing in them now transfer over to the building. Next slide. So when we looked at the draft membership rates, we looked at, again, membership type, a basic member, looking at an individual couple, family of 4, senior, a resident and non-resident. We looked at a premier member, which included individual couple, family, senior, which this really looks at unlimited use of facility during open recreation times. It provides priority registration on most programs at least 1 week in advance. It also allows premier members to have extended hours, also 10 free guest passes, and it has child watch programs within it. But there's also a senior social annual, which basically gets access to all the senior areas on a social basis. That's currently occurring now at the existing senior center. And then a senior healthy lifestyle, which is full use of the building during off hours. And then additional child beyond 4, what that would be on a monthly basis of a family. Next slide. So when we look at this as a full potential based on the current size of the design, looking at partnerships that are potential could be a part of this building. And we looked at this as a 3% market capture for memberships and a 70% program capacity. So in other words, the building spaces will be occupied if it's open to 110 hours a week. 70% of the time, the building is either used by members or by programs to maximize its value and its connectivity to the community. And in looking at this, we looked at it on a yearly 6-year basis for passes and expenditures for staffing, and a capital. Part of our cost in the capital was to build in a 5% maintenance endowment that we would be capturing every year. And as the building ages, there's opportunities to reinvest in the building, keep the building as strong as it can in terms of position in the market, its ability to take care of its asset and maintain it for a very long period of time. And by doing that, it gives comfort level to the city that they're not having to go back and ask taxpayers for or anybody for additional support because we're collecting it on the front end. So on a full potential Proforma, which is looking at those capture rates of 3% of the market capture and 70% of program capacity, the building is capable of doing a cost recovery level of 107% based on the plan program, and the plan program involved all of the recreation and park staff and how they would program the building and how they would schedule it on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis as part of the work. So there was a high level of involvement by the Parks and Recreation staff in this Proforma. So when you look at it from a market stress test, and part of this would look at the assumptions would be reduced from full potential Proforma. We would, to do that, we would say, okay, let's look at this with a third less memberships, 50% less daily admission, 20% program capacity less, and 33% to 50% less rentals. That would then, if that's the case, the cost recovery levels would be 79, 80, 80%. And we would consider a very, very conservative level. Having done this for other communities, this is well below what other community centers are doing in the region in relationship to how they program their sites and how the market basically lines up in terms of pricing, similar to what we're recommending here for Upper Arlington.
And I would just add, Leon, that that's really a slide that the Finance Subcommittee leaned into heavily and revisited several times throughout this analysis was this stress test. You know, what if things don't go according to plan? how is this going to turn out? And it was reassuring to see we're still at that 80% cost recovery benchmark. And I think, as we mentioned at the outset, we're still within the range of what, currently the city spends about a little over $500,000 a year supporting some of these services that will now be encompassed and wrapped into the community center. So even at this, really conservative stress test, we're in that range still. And that was reassuring. And I know a lot of community feedback that was really helpful along the way about, we need to beat this thing up and look at how it's going to work under different scenarios. So we appreciate your team running through several scenarios here with the finance subcommittee. It's very helpful.
Thank you.
I want to add one more thing related, and this is consistent with kind of the approach on the operations. Obviously, they feel, the subcommittee feels very comfortable with the stress tests and where they're at, and very conservative numbers. Same thing, I just want to emphasize related to the overall cost of the building. People are always worried when something gets built. I just want to emphasize something Nan was going through. When something gets built, what happens if we go over budget? And built into our estimate is 23.5% worth of contingency and escalation. And so if you look at the $54 million number that we have on Kingsdale, built into that is 24% basically of contingency and escalation. So we feel, and we feel that we have taken a very conservative approach on the construction side, just as Matt and his team have taken a conservative approach on the operating side. So from both standpoints, we feel very comfortable that the numbers that we're putting out there are really doable. So I just wanted to emphasize that because I know there's always a concern regarding the overall cost of the building. And then secondly, how do you operate the building and those costs too. So I think both teams have taken a conservative approach on that.
Thanks, Greg. We will head back to Aaron for a little feedback from the community.
Thanks, Dan. And I'm going to ask Jeff to help us administer this poll. There are a number of elements in the project that we presented that we want to get your feedback on. The first is that the question is there an element of the project that you need more information on? So we realize and we're sensitive to that there's been a lot of information presented today. So we would be curious to know from you as a guest here in the meeting, if there's one particular space that you feel you'd like more information. That will allow us and the task force more time to respond and present that information back to the task force as well as council. Jeff, am I missing anything here too on the administration of the poll?
No, they're all set. The responses are coming in now, so I'll just give everyone a few minutes to make their choice. And do remember, you can pick more than one. So if there's multiple areas you feel like you'd like a little more information, feel free to select one or more.
Thanks, Jeff. Jeff will make sure we all see the results here shortly if we can't see them already.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll share them once they're done. We're still getting a few coming in, so we'll wait just a little bit longer here.
So we're trying to do this to provide some level of feedback in some organized fashion on a call with almost 90 people. So while we can't have a good open dialogue, we're trying to get some of this information back so that we can continue to refine and get informed moving forward.
I'm going to go ahead and, oh, there's a couple more coming in. I'll give about 10 more seconds here, and then we'll stop and share the results. We should be able to see that now. Can you see it?
We can see it. Thanks, Jeff. So it looks like the final features and programs, that's one place people would really like to get some more information on, followed by membership cost and financing and so on. So we realize we presented some of that data, but it sounds like some folks might want to dig a little bit deeper into some of those project elements. The next question is going to be on operations. So I think that's where we're going next, right, Jeff? Or no, I'm sorry, it's about the level of support or excitement. So just generally, we want to kind of have a feel-good question about what is your current level of excitement or support for the community center moving forward at this point. Very excited, moderately excited, slightly neutral, or none of the above. What is your current level of excitement or support for the community center moving forward at this point? And now that you've had more information. How we doing, Jeff?
It looks like we got most people in. We'll wait just a second here.
I don't know if everybody can see this, but right now there are 85 participants in this call. So just wanted to make sure everybody saw that. So based on those that are responding today, looks like 54% are very excited or supportive of the community center moving forward. Moderately at 23, slight at 11, 3 at neutral, and 8 at none, with little support. So good to see everybody answering the question and how the results came in. Thanks again for that. So we're getting near the end here. This last question is about the task force meeting. It's scheduled to present their recommendations to City Council on the 16th. We're just curious from those that are here today, do you plan to attend the meeting? We just wanted to get a good pulse from everybody that is here today, whether or not they'll attend, kind of give the city leadership, the task force and staff some idea of maybe what that meeting might look like and how many folks may be in attendance.
We'll wrap that up here.
Okay, 78% of those here today, almost our 90 participants said they do plan to attend the meeting. So that's great. I'm sure it'll turn out to be a great meeting with that many people showing up and participating. I think that was our last question, was it not, Jeff?
That was all of them.
So at this point, I guess I'll turn it back over to Nan, or Nan and I can talk a little bit about where we go from here, which is essentially what you see on these upcoming dates, meaning we're going to have our task force meeting on the 9th, and then we have council presentations scheduled for the 16th and January 11th of 2021. It feels good to say that, respectively. And so there's a couple more chances to stay involved and provide your input. Since I have the floor, I'll just keep talking for a minute. The presentations that we anticipate on giving to council will have a lot of the same information that we gave tonight. There might be some new slides and some information, but at this point, the consultant team is kind of done doing their work and generating a lot of the content. So you'll see more of what you just saw tonight. So I didn't want everybody to think that they'll come see a whole new presentation. And do you want to have any closing remarks?
Yeah, and I think the consultant team has really assembled a lot of information and worked with the subcommittees and has made some of our recommendations. And now it's up to the task force to really pull everything together. And I know all the subcommittees are in the process of pulling their recommendations together to go to the task force. So, I think Margie and Nick will be guiding that process as they put together their recommendations at that meeting. And shape how they want to present this to council. So I don't know if someone from the task force wants to touch on that any further or not.
This is Margie. No, I think we'll continue to have opportunities for people to provide input, both through the website that's specifically designed for the task force, as well as other opportunities. I didn't know, and maybe this, I thank you.
Yeah.
There's places where you can provide additional feedback on this screen. These are two, and for additional information, you can find that at uacommunitycenter.com. There's a lot of information on that website, and you can, as you can see, there's other places to provide the feedback. I don't know, were we going to be responding to some of the questions that were in the chat? I might have missed what the plan was, Jeff. You're on mute.
Try again there. Sorry about that. Yeah, we've been monitoring the chat the whole time. We can throw out a few questions and let you and the other subcommittee chairs provide some more information if that works for you guys.
And I'll take the screen down.
Particularly, Jeff, questions that are where there's questions.
Absolutely.
A lot of folks gave some really helpful feedback. I think what we want to do is maybe focus in on responding to those folks that may have questions.
Yeah.
So
One question we got was about timeline. If the task force makes a recommendation to move forward, when would we anticipate a community center being built?
So I'm going to let folks that are much more knowledgeable about that kind of thing than I am. I don't know whether it's a Steve
Yeah, I can.
or Greg.
Yeah, I'll answer that. The current schedule, which is obviously very rough, but we would make a recommendation to council. They would want to put this on the ballot for the community to weigh in on it, and that would be in May. If it is successful in May, then design would start. So really what we've been doing to date is just very high level conceptual stuff. In May, the actual design would start. That would take approximately a year. So somewhere to starting in May, June of 21, and that would take us through June of 22, which is when construction could start. And so we'd anticipate approximately a 2-year construction timeline. And so we would be looking at somewhere April, May, June, July, somewhere in that range of 2024 to have the building constructed.
Good. Other questions, Jeff?
Yeah, we got one here. Someone, we've had a couple of people ask about a TIF, maybe a little more information on what a TIF is and kind of how that is affected in the project.
I don't know,
Yes,
Matt, you want to take that, or Steve?
It's up to you.
Steve, can you cover it in less than 2 hours? You know what? I'll give my. You know, it's a great question because it's something that Steve and other folks at the city really dove into early on, explaining to broader committee and also to the finance subcommittee with a little more detail. You know, Steve, I'll give my summary of it in a few sentences and feel free to add on. But essentially, a TIF is where the property taxes from another use. So these are from a mixed income project, such as the proposed Kingsdale redevelopment, or a different mixed income project. That the real estate taxes from that, a large portion of them are applied towards a community benefit. A community benefit here would be the community center and the infrastructure associated therewith. And so I think I saw it, you know, kind of the follow-on question on that in the chat room was, well, how does that finance capital costs? Well, those TIF proceeds are an ongoing stream over future years. And what the city would do is capitalize that ongoing revenue stream. So they'd issue debt upfront to pay for the building. And that ongoing revenue stream of TIF proceeds from other developments would pay the debt service on that upfront bond issuance. So Steve, that's about as concise as I can make it. And I'm sure I missed a lot of points that are poignant. So jump in there.
Mr. Rule, I think I would probably, if I was grading you in a class, I'd probably give you about a 90% on that one. I think one thing that I would make clear in that is that what we're talking about is it's called tax increment financing, because we're talking about the incremental growth in the taxes. So the relationship, the reimbursement agreement that we've got set up with the schools, that we've proposed to the schools that they're considering, is they would continue to receive the revenue they receive today off of the development. Additionally, if the schools put more millage on, so not just the renewals, but if they do put more millage on for whatever reason, that additional millage on this site would go to the schools. So, however, the growth in revenue, because of two things. One is the office that would be included in the or in the community center building, those top 2 floors, as well as the apartments and the senior living building. The additional income tax revenue that's generated from those would fall into this tax increment financing fund, and that fund would be used to pay for roads, parking garage, traffic lights, crosswalks, and the community center. See, it took me less than 2 hours.
Well, and it is complicated. However, it does not, it's important to clarify that it doesn't result in any tax increases for citizens. And that's the important thing.
No,
So,
it's capturing the revenue that is generated by this new development and investing it to a specific purpose.
right.
That 90%, by the way, just significantly increased my GPA. So I do appreciate that. It's kind of you.
Yeah. Oh, it's grading on a curve.
Jeff, any other questions? We've got some real, I think.
Yeah. We had someone ask if they can get a copy of the presentation, and we can let everyone know a copy of the presentation as well as a recording of this meeting will be posted on the website on the last slide there. So uacommunitycenter.com. We've had someone ask who would most likely run the day-to-day operations of the facility. Are we thinking city staff, or it would be a management company?
Anybody in particular? I don't know if we've made that decision yet, or if we have. There's several options, that communities either operate them themselves, or they contract with a company that manages it for them. So I don't know, Steve. Since
Yeah,
it's a city facility, what your thought is.
We've looked into it. It's something that we're going to continue to explore. I think you can see it done successfully both ways. Part of it is just understanding what's available at the time that when we get closer to opening. Some of this is just simply an evaluation that as we make assuming that we go forward, as we make progress, it'll be something we continue to evaluate. Leon, I don't know if you've got any insights on that question from the work you've done around the country on these kinds of issues.
Thanks, Steve. We had built the Proforma based on the staff input and the staff actually managing the facility based on all of their costs, their instructor costs. But certainly, looking at if it was managed by a private entity, we would have to update the Proforma to reflect their cost and also how they would approach the building. My feeling about it is that I would say that 80% to 85% of all of the public community centers around the United States are actually managed by public employees. And those that are managed by a private entity, usually as a not-for-profit, and maybe one or two elements in the building that would be an element that's a private, like some level of food service or some component of the building that's typically driven by the private sector. So at this point, we didn't have really a strategy for that. We've talked a lot about it, but in the process of doing it, we had to put together a performer that really looks at how you would operate it and how the city would manage it. And if they at some point wants to look at it privately, we would break up the performer to look at what elements the private sector or as a not-for-profit would manage it.
We've had a few questions about amenities for seniors in the facility. So I don't know if Greg and Nan, you guys could maybe elaborate a little bit more on amenities for seniors and how those get integrated into the building.
You want to take that, Nan? I think.
Sure. So, the way this space is organized is really that there are some spaces that will be dedicated for senior use, and then there'll be quite a few spaces that are also multi-use. And so there'll be a senior lounge, there'll be some resource centers where someone might come in and offer counseling on Medicare or how to sign up for that, or some other senior related topics. There will continue to be, there'll be like billiards, and there'll be a variety of those kind of gathering and social spaces like you have now. The shared spaces, it was intentional that the senior center and the multifunction room were located adjacent to one another on the same floor. I think that's one of the great things about this particular concept, because you can continue to have those large lunches or other programs in there, but that will be shared use. So there will be other functions that will happen in there. The art rooms, the multi-use rooms, those are all on the same floor. So I just think there'll be a lot of amenities for seniors, similar to what's happening in the current senior center, that will be incorporated here, and then also many more functions that'll be available. So I'm hoping that kind of gives you a high altitude look at that.
I think there was also a question, Jeff, somewhat related about the pools and the availability of lap.
Yes, so this pool is shown with 4 lap lanes, 25 yards.
So we've had some questions. How does the concept that you guys are showing compare to other local examples such as Dublin or Westerville?
In square footage or program, or Debbie, you want to take that?
Sure. So the proposed square footage of this facility is around 100,000 square feet. In comparison, the City of Dublin Community Center is 110,000 square feet. Worthington is 72,000 square feet. Westerville just expanded from 96,000 square feet to now 145,000 square feet.
And can you give some perspective on the population of those communities like Westerville and Dublin and even Worthington?
I don't have current population numbers available. I'm not sure if anybody else on this team may have that.
I think their populations
Or generally
larger than ours. I just wanted to give some, perspective to that in terms of their size and their population.
I'm not positive about Worthington in comparison to Upper Arlington, but Westerville and Dublin are larger.
Okay.
We received a question about what would happen to the existing senior center if this facility became a reality.
I'll take that one. So part of our agreement with the schools is that if a new community center is built after it opens, we will transfer that land to the schools. We will raise that building and turn it over to the schools so that they can use it in conjunction with Tremont Elementary and the athletic fields that they have there. But that will not, by the way, that will not happen until after the community center opens.
Similar to that, we also had a question on if any of the offices in the MSC would be included in the Kingsdale site. I know the task force had shared a combined concept at the MSC, and I think we're looking for clarity on Kingsdale.
I can say somewhat to the chagrin of staff at the MSC who would really enjoy being at this site. No, we will be remaining at the MSC. The building really is, it's been well maintained. We've got some improvements that we need to make, in particular to the police portion, which we've got budgeted, and we're gonna upgrade for those. But there is not a compelling need to move city offices, so we're not going to take on that expense.
Great. As we start to get near the end here, I will throw out that, you know, we are keeping a record of all the chat conversation on here, and we do have a frequently asked questions section on the UA Community Center website. So we will try to respond and update that as well. So I know the other panelists are able to see the questions. I know there's several on here. Are there any other key ones we need to touch on here?
I would just add that in the comparison I had with the community centers, the number I gave for Upper Arlington is for the community center portion. It does not include the office spaces on the floors above. So it's just the recreation community center components.
Jeff, there was one other question in there that, you know, will the apartments receive a special rate? The answer is no. On community center membership, they'll be treated like any other residents in the community.
There was a question about, will there be a theater in the community center? Some kind of theater space?
Want me to take that?
Yeah, that'd be great, Nan.
So we did look at the possibility of that. So we do not have a dedicated like black box theater, but we do have a stage, a portable stage that can be part of the multi-purpose room, so that there could be recitals or other functions there, but it won't be a black box theater. But there will be an ability to have some performances there.
And actually, Leon, we talked about this a little bit in phase one, and there were some results from the survey, and you gave some pretty good insights on what you've seen in terms of the use of theater space in other community centers. You want to run through that for a little bit?
Yeah, what typically the theater spaces are, they have limited use. Most of them are built around 400 people at the tops. In terms of a black box theater, more like 250. And the level of capacity and use is typically pretty low. It's usually in the 35 to 40% of the space is used. What we have found is that by creating a stage environment in the community gathering room where we have banquets and those kind of things that create a stage there that has the capability of being a stage for plays and entertainment as well as music, has really met the majority of what people are looking for. Except when you get into a black box theater, it's a different kind of an experience than what we're talking about. But if we're just talking about stage and how to use it and in a very functional way, that we have found that to have the highest level of use over the top of a black box theater. But again, it's everybody's preferences. Every town's different, but certainly our experience has been really trying to make every space we have in the building as multifunctional as it can be, so it's adaptable to be used.
I do see one question here that we got. Matt, and this would be a good one for you. The cost recovery goal was listed at 80%. Where would the other 20% for the operating come from?
Yeah, so as you saw, there was a 100% plus cost recovery model that Leon had worked through with city staff. And then when we stress tested it, it was down in that 80% range. So it would be a gap, right? You saw that in Leon's Proforma. And so working through that, what the city has done historically is funded some of these essential services to the city's residents, programming, city staff involved in those programming activities, the costs associated therewith, to the tune of about $500,000 a year. And if those would be services that would essentially be wrapped into what a new community center would look like. So that $500,000 that the city has historically provided from their operating budget to provide some of these important services to the residents. That could be used as the gap filler if we were in a very stressed situation with a cost recovery model dipping into that 80% realm. You know, if we run the cost recovery model at closer to 100%, then the city will actually not have to incur those funds that they've spent, those proceeds that they've spent historically on some of those important resident services.
Other questions, Jeff? You can see I'm taking a look as well.
Yeah, we did get one here. Nan, could you point out where the exercise equipment would be? That kind of got overlooked as we were going through.
Do you want me to pull that back up on the screen?
Either way, or just explain.
Yeah, so actually the exercise equipment is on the second level. So group exercise and the fitness like equipment will be on the second level.
There were also some questions, Jeff, I think related to the office space above the community center. And do other cities' facilities include office space, and just generally who would manage that? And I don't know if there were 2 or 3 related questions on that.
Matt, do you want to take that, or do you want to start on that, or do you want me to go?
Yeah, I think the question is dealing with about 50,000 square feet of anticipated office space that would be in 2 floors above the community center, and with an approximate cost of a conservative approximate cost, I believe, of around $10 million. And really, the vision here, I think, on that office space is that it would be prime office space in the heart of Upper Arlington. Obviously, co-located with a tremendous amenity for the employees residing in that office space, just below if the community center came to fruition. So I think, you know, the city sees this as an opportunity based on the private consulting that they brought on board to do some modeling around this. The lease stream from that office facility would cover the debt service on the bond issuance to fund that $10 million, 2 stories, 50,000 square feet. So the lease payments would cover the debt issuance and also provide some excess cash that could be applied towards the community center obligations as well. So I think it's a prime office space. It's co-located with a tremendous amenity, and I think there's been some initial conversations that maybe Steve, you can talk to the vision of the city for what kind of partner the city's in discussions with and looking at coming into that space.
Yeah, and I think one of the questions is, would this compete with the private developer's office? The answer is no, because the vision is to have 50 to 60,000 square feet of rentable office space on the Macy's site. So in the configuration that we're talking about, that would be part of our building. We have looked at models where we would basically develop kind of a condo structure for the building where somebody else would own the office floors. We determined that, frankly, that wasn't as good a financial deal for the city. We're pretty confident in we've gotten very strong interest already from folks in terms of leasing that space, even in a post-COVID environment. I will tell you that when we talk to potential office tenants, they're looking at the world and saying we have to convince our workers to come back to the office, which means we need an amenity-rich environment. There won't be anywhere that is in Central Ohio that has better amenities than this. I mean, you're going to be within walking distance of 2 groceries, 3 pharmacies, 12 restaurants, and oh, by the way, you're sitting on top of a 96,000 square foot community center that has function space in an extremely safe community with a good workforce. That space is going to lease up pretty well, and we're only talking about 50,000 square feet of it. So we're feeling appropriately optimistic. We recognize it's a big move for us, but we're doing the research to make sure it's a wise move.
Good. Thank you. Anything else, Jeff, you can see here? As you said, you have a Q&A section, and so any questions we haven't answered here, you'll be responding to these and posting the responses, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have a FAQ on there now, and we can definitely take a quick look at that and make sure that the questions are being addressed on there.
There's one more question that I got to address because it comes up, and it's the last question I saw. It's the blue bricks. It took us until the very end of the meeting for somebody to raise the blue bricks. We have talked with Continental. They are intending to have some kind of a system for those who want the blue bricks to be able to access the blue bricks. We will work with them when they get into the demo period with that. I will thank the resident who asked that question for getting that out there. It wouldn't be a community center meeting without having somebody ask about the blue bricks. So thank you for putting that piece in there.
Okay. It's 8:30. Do we have anything else before we close? Silence is golden. So I'm going to wrap up, I think. You talked about next steps. I think just to once again thank all of the residents and individuals who participated and who were in attendance at this session, as well as our task force members who presented, our consultants, and as well as our staff from the city of Upper Arlington. We're appreciative of the work. We'll continue to keep you apprised and continue to communicate. You know those key dates. We'll continue to publicize those key dates between now and through the first part of 2021. So anything else for the good of the order? Okay, thank you, and have a great rest of your evening. Take care.